getting into audio gear or really any tech knows it's an expensive hobby. A $100 mic sounds great, though when you start to factor everything else in to get that mic to work, it can be financially daunting. We all want to have something that is as close to a professional standard as possible, which means we may hit the used market. And you know what? There are a lot of gems out there that you can pick up for a really fair price. More on that, as well as some things to look for a bit later. So when I saw this microphone, the Electro-Voice 257ND, for sale on Facebook Marketplace, I was quick to jump on it. For one, it's an Electro-Voice. They really have never made cheap microphones, especially when you see that ND on them. That stands for neodymium. That is referencing the magnet in it, which is a rare earth magnet, and really a premium add to any of the mics, especially ones that were built in the 80s. And you know what? Considering I only spent about $40 US on this mic, well, it's basically as advertised. If you do a bit of research on the lineup, they were meant for singers and it doubled nicely as a mic for horns. It is kind of bright, and I'm sure that it was meant to help cut through the mix. It's not a bad mic considering the price and the history on it. But again, this is about cautionary tales, right? So what's the issue? Well, for one, when buying older gear at a discount, there are some things to consider. First of all, Electro-Voice did cancel this lineup of mics back in the 90s. In fact, it was reworked in the 80s, especially the aesthetics. But all in all, the lineup didn't make it, and historically that happens for one of a few reasons. Either it didn't perform to the high standards set out by the company, or it couldn't cut through the marketing of the other big giants on the scene at the time. So you might be taking a chance on a piece of gear that people didn't want or like back before digital sound. Not a good sign. But let's say you're getting that diamond in the rough. Well, this is the other easily overlooked issue with mics like this. And yes, that's as gross as you think it is. There has to be 40 plus years of nasty on that foam, so much so that it was eaten away over time. I mean, the capsule does still look rather nice, so I guess it's got that going for it. It can be really hard to start tearing gear apart when you're buying it though, especially when it's only $40. It's just easier to plug it in, see if it works, and then pay, right? Well, this is something I could have caught. Now, I'm not that hurt over the condition of this mic as I was buying it for this, making videos. But for someone else, that could be the kind of stuff that ruins it for them. By the way, I did call Electro-Voice, and while they're happy to help with an old RA20, they aren't making this model anymore or servicing it. So we need to have some homemade solutions with that capsule and that foam. That's okay though. We can deal with that. But let's say you aren't willing to go through all the trouble of getting something like this up and running, or perhaps you don't know the specifics of doing all that. What should you be looking for when you buy used? Well, aside from plugging the mic in and just listening, it might be a good idea to dismantle as much of the mic as possible. Especially with dynamic mics, though it can be pretty important when buying a condenser as well. This can be awkward when you're checking it out, but if someone is against the idea, it might be enough of a red flag to make you turn around and not buy the mic. The important part of this is to look for damage, but also look for signs that it might be a knockoff. A lot of this is easy to pick up on with photos. Just search what the capsule looks like or even the body. The giveaway might be something small, so don't hesitate to really be critical. And while there are a ton of fakes for mics like the MKH416, one of the most popular mics to clone is the SM58. So it really is worth giving it a once-over if you aren't buying from a reputable source. Now, all of this is especially necessary if it seems the price is too good to be true. Now, while mics like this discontinued Electro-Voice can be a steal, something like a Shure SM58 should retain a good deal of its value, even with some scratches. And to tag onto that last point about the too good to be true purchases, you will see it a lot with more expensive microphones. Things like the aforementioned MKH416 or really any Neumann product are some of the favorites for people to clone. So if you are dipping into any of those used purchases, make sure you go in with as much information as possible. And lastly, avoid a lot of online purchases that are not through registered resellers. Things like Amazon and eBay are fine if you have the ability to call the seller on their crap. But again, there are some good clones out there, so make sure you educate on what you should be getting. But other online purchases should be avoided unless there's some sort of return protection. All of that aside though, the used market is a great place to bolster your studio or podcast setup. Sometimes you can hit gold with mics like this one, though I don't think this is exactly the case for me here. Just remember though, everyone overvalues their gear. Sometimes the best prices you're going to get are buying the used rental gear from stores. Their prices might be a touch inflated, but in my experience, you can usually get a pretty good deal if you know how to barter. And when it comes to interfaces, probably the best thing I can offer for advice is make sure you test the noise level when you gain it up. Also, test it with a dynamic and a condenser to make sure everything is working. Otherwise, try to test the outputs as well, both headphones and the main outs. Something like that isn't top of mind when you're testing the equipment. Otherwise, let me know if I missed something down below. Cheers.